The clock read 3:15 a.m. when Michael Bennett realized his life of appearances was about to unravel. The top-floor office of the corporate building, with its panoramic view of the sleeping city, no longer offered the comfort it once did. His hands trembled slightly as he held a glass of whiskey, gazing at the city lights that twinkled like earthly stars through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The church's charity meeting had ended hours ago, yet another event where he had handed out rehearsed smiles and calculated handshakes. The emptiness in his chest, however, remained. Not even the congratulations for his construction company's recent success could fill the persistent sense that something essential was missing in his life. Michael stared at his reflection in the mirrored window, the impeccable Italian suit, the gray streaks at his temples that gave him an air of distinction, the posture that exuded power and control. It was all part of a facade carefully crafted over 2 decades. At 45, he had achieved everything money could buy, but the cost had been his peace of mind. The earlier meeting with his accountant still echoed in his thoughts. Thomas, ever meticulous, had presented a series of documents that made his stomach churn. Subtle discrepancies in government contracts, mismatched figures, suspicious patterns in bids his company had been winning for years. Signs he had chosen to ignore, convincing himself it was just the cost of doing business in the real world. "Something's not right, Mr. Bennett," Thomas had said, his voice trembling slightly. "These numbers, there's a pattern here that suggests something far bigger than simple accounting errors." Michael had brushed off the concerns with a practiced gesture of indifference, but now, alone in his office, the accountant's words weighed on him like lead. How many times had he turned a blind eye to minor irregularities? How many times had he convinced himself that the ends justified the means? His thoughts drifted to his late wife, Katherine. She had always seen through his masks, always encouraged him to do what was right no matter the cost. "Integrity isn't something you can buy back once it's lost, Michael," she used to say. Her passing 5 years ago had left a void no professional success could ever fill. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty hallways as he headed for the elevator. His Mercedes awaited him in the garage, yet another symbol of success that now felt so hollow. The descent to the ground floor was accompanied only by the soft hum of the cabin and the growing weight in his chest. The elevator doors opened to the deserted lobby, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. That was when something, or someone, caught his attention. Near the building's entrance, a woman was huddled, trying to shield herself from the cold of the early morning. Normally, Michael would have walked right past, as he had hundreds of times before. The city was full of homeless people, and he had long since learned to harden his heart to such sights. But something about this woman made him stop. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, even in such a precarious situation, or maybe it was simply the weight of his own conscience choosing that moment to assert itself. "Ma'am?" The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. "Do you need help?" When she lifted her face, Michael felt the world come to a standstill. The eyes that met his were a deep green, marked by sharp intelligence and a pain he instantly recognized. It was the same kind of pain he saw in his own reflection every morning. "Emma Crawford," she introduced herself, her voice carrying a refined education that starkly contrasted with her current circumstances. "And no, Mr. Bennett, I don't need help. On the contrary, perhaps I'm exactly the person who can help you." The shock of hearing his name from the lips of a stranger froze him in place. How did she know who he was? The question barely formed in his mind before Emma continued. "I know about Bennett Construction's contracts. I know about the embezzlement, the rigged bids, the altered documents. I also know that you're not the architect of this fraud, just another pawn in a much bigger game." The world seemed to spin around Michael. There, in the early hours of that freezing morning, stood someone who knew his darkest secrets, his deepest fears. Yet instead of the dread he thought he'd feel, a strange sense of relief washed over him. "How?" was all he could stammer. Emma rose with surprising grace, revealing that her worn coat must have once been a piece of high fashion. "I used to be a corporate attorney, Mr. Bennett. A specialist in government contracts at the firm representing your biggest competitors. Until the day I uncovered a disturbing pattern in the bids, a scheme so intricately designed, it almost seemed legal. When I started asking questions, when I began digging deeper, well, let's just say some people prefer certain truths to stay buried." Michael scrutinized Emma more closely. Despite her current circumstances, there was a strength in her gaze that spoke of unwavering determination. Her gestures, her posture, her manner of speaking, all pointed to someone who had once lived a very different life. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why now?" Emma gave a sad smile. "Because I saw something in your eyes during that charity event tonight. While you handed out smiles and promises of donations, I saw the same look I see in my own eyes every morning. The look of someone who knows they're living a lie. The lobby, usually so grand with its marble and mirrors, had transformed into an impromptu confessional. Michael realized he was at a crossroads. He could dismiss this encounter, return to his life of facades and lies, or he could finally face the shadows that had been haunting him. "There's a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from here," he heard himself say, his voice steadier than he expected. "Care to join me for coffee?" A faint smile appeared on Emma's lips, not one of triumph but of understanding. "Coffee sounds great. I have a story to tell you, Mr. Bennett. A story about choices, consequences, and perhaps redemption." As they walked down the deserted street, Michael felt the weight of years of guilt and solitude begin to lift. The cold wind of the early morning seemed to cleanse not just the air but also his mind. That chance encounter wasn't merely a coincidence, it was the start of something far greater, a journey that would force him to question everything he believed in. The night was about to reveal its deepest secrets, and Michael Bennett, for the first time in a long while, was ready to listen. The man who had entered the building hours earlier, carrying the weight of corporate secrets and empty promises, now walked alongside a stranger who, paradoxically, seemed to understand him better than anyone in his life. The city slept, unaware of the drama unfolding on its empty streets, while 2 souls marked by destiny began a journey that would change their lives forever. The 24-hour coffee shop was an oasis of light and warmth amidst the darkness of the early morning. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the modest space as Michael and Emma settled into a discreet table at the back of the establishment. The contrast between them couldn't have been greater. He in his tailored Italian suit, she in her worn clothes that still held traces of elegance. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes, approached with the coffee pot. "The usual for you, Mr. Bennett?" she asked, revealing that Michael was a regular customer during his sleepless nights. He nodded, and Emma simply ordered a black coffee. "I come here often," Michael explained after the waitress walked away. "On nights when the silence in my house becomes deafening." There was a vulnerability in his voice that surprised him. It had been years since he had opened up like that to anyone. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, absorbing its warmth. "Silence can be a relentless judge, can't it? It forces us to hear the thoughts we try to ignore during the day." Her green eyes met his. "But you're not here to talk about insomnia, are you?" Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few hours on his shoulders. "How do you know so much about my company? About the bids?" 3 years ago, I was a junior partner at Moore & Associates, Emma began, her voice low but firm. "Specializing in corporate law, focusing on government contracts. I was known for my attention to detail, for finding patterns where others saw only random numbers." She paused to take a sip of coffee, her eyes momentarily lost in memories. "It was during the analysis of a series of bids that I noticed something strange. Small coincidences that, alone, meant nothing, but together formed a disturbing pattern. Companies that always lost by specific margins, others that always won under certain conditions. Bennett Construction was at the center of this pattern." Michael felt his heart race. He knew exactly what she was talking about. The strategic wins that his CFO, James Morton, always insisted were just the result of deficient management. "When I started digging deeper," Emma continued, "I uncovered a tangled web of shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees, documents altered with impressive subtlety. But the most interesting thing was realizing that you, Michael Bennett, seemed strangely unaware of much of what was happening in your own company." "James?" Michael murmured, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "He always insisted I focus on the operational side, leaving the boring paperwork to him." Emma nodded. "James Morton is just the tip of the iceberg. There are much more powerful people involved, people who won't hesitate to destroy lives to protect their interests." Her voice trembled slightly. "I learned that the hard way." It was then that Michael noticed a small scar near Emma's temple, partially hidden by her hair. "What happened to you?" he asked, though he feared the answer. "When I presented my findings to the senior partners at the firm, I expected to initiate an internal investigation. Instead, I was advised to forget about it. When I refused..." She took a deep breath, trying to steady the emotion in her voice. "First, there were the veiled threats, then my apartment was broken into, a common robbery, according to the police. The message was clear, but I was stubborn enough not to listen. One night, coming home from work, I was attacked in the parking lot. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later with a concussion and several broken ribs. When I was discharged, I found out I had been fired for inappropriate conduct, my professional reputation was destroyed, and my savings had mysteriously vanished from my accounts. Michael felt a wave of nausea. How had his pursuit of business success turned into something so dark? Why are you telling me this now? Why risk it again? Emma smiled sadly. Because during that charity event today, I saw something in your eyes when you spoke about helping the less fortunate. I saw guilt, I saw regret, but most of all, I saw humanity. And maybe, she hesitated. Maybe this is our chance for redemption. The silence that followed was filled only by the soft sounds of the coffee shop, the clink of cups, the low murmur of distant conversations, the gentle hum of the coffee machine. Michael watched Emma, seeing beyond her worn clothes and tired appearance. He saw a woman who had sacrificed everything for the truth, who, even after losing everything, still maintained her integrity. "What are you suggesting?" he finally asked. "A partnership," Emma replied, leaning forward. "You have access to the company's internal documents, and I have the expertise to identify the crucial evidence. Together, we can expose the scheme without the wrong people noticing, at least not before it's too late for them to react." "It would be dangerous," Michael warned, more to himself than to her. "More dangerous than living with this guilt? More dangerous than knowing innocent people are being harmed while we close our eyes?" Emma gently questioned. "Besides, you have something I didn't have when I tried to do this alone. Resources and influence?" Michael looked out the coffee shop window, watching the first signs of dawn tinting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The city began to wake, unaware of the conversation that would change the course of several lives. "Katherine would have liked you," he finally said, a sad smile playing at the corners of his lips. "My wife, she always said it's never too late to do the right thing." Emma nodded in understanding. "She seems to have been a wise woman." "She was." Michael straightened in his chair, a new determination in his eyes. "Where do we start?" "First, we need to establish a safe way to communicate," Emma replied, the years of legal experience evident in her voice. "And you need to keep your routine normal. Any sudden changes could raise suspicion." As they discussed the initial details of their plan, the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the city. For Michael Bennett, that dawn marked more than the beginning of a new day, it was the start of his journey toward redemption. By Emma Crawford's side, a woman who had lost everything except her integrity, he had finally found a purpose greater than the mere accumulation of wealth and power. The city awoke to another ordinary day, unaware that in that modest coffee shop, two wounded souls had just formed an alliance that would shake the foundations of corporate power and change their lives forever. The weeks that followed transformed Michael Bennett's life in ways he never could have imagined. During the day, he maintained his normal routine at Bennett Construction, attending meetings, signing documents, playing the part of the successful CEO. But his nights had become a deep dive into the dark secrets of his own company. Emma had found a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, thanks to an organization supporting homeless individuals. Michael had insisted on helping her financially, but she refused. "I can't risk leaving a trail," she explained. However, she agreed to let him provide the resources necessary for their joint investigation. On a particularly cold night, as they were reviewing documents in Emma's apartment, Michael watched as she worked methodically, her green eyes fixed on the papers scattered across the simple wooden table. There was something hypnotic about her dedication, how each discovery seemed to fuel her determination rather than diminish it. "I found something," she said suddenly, her voice trembling slightly. "Michael, look at this." He moved closer, catching the faint scent of lavender she wore, a small luxury she'd kept from her previous life. Emma pointed to a series of bank transfers that seemed routine at first glance. "Do you see these payments to Andrews and Partners Consulting? They're all multiples of 47. Doesn't that seem strange?" Her fingers traced the lines of numbers. "In corporate law, we learn to look for unusual patterns. Specific numbers are often used as codes for different types of illegal transactions." A chill ran down Michael's spine. "Andrews and Partners. James insisted we hire them 2 years ago, said they were experts in tax optimization." "They're a shell company," Emma confirmed, pulling out another document. "But what's interesting isn't that. Look at who signed as their financial director." Michael's blood ran cold. There, in black and white, was the signature of Robert Morton E. James' brother. "My God," Michael whispered, collapsing heavily into the nearest chair. "How could I have been so blind?" Emma gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saw what you wanted to see, Michael. It's what we all do sometimes." The moment of realization was interrupted by a sound that made them both freeze, footsteps in the hallway stopping right outside the apartment door. Emma reacted instantly, moving with a speed born of fear. Within seconds, the documents were tucked into a fake recipe folder, and she motioned for Michael to hide in the small closet. The knock on the door came strong, authoritative. "Miss Crawford? Police. We need to ask you a few questions." Michael's heart pounded so loudly he feared it might be heard through the closet door. Through the cracks, he saw Emma take a deep breath, compose herself, and open the door. Two men in suits flashed badges. "I'm Detective Parker, this is Detective Rodriguez. We've received a tip about suspicious activities at this address." Emma held her composure, her voice calm and controlled. "What kind of suspicious activities, Detective? People coming and going at odd hours, late-night meetings?" The taller Detective Parker took a step forward, his eyes scanning the apartment. "Do you live alone?" "Yes," Emma answered without hesitation. "I work as a freelancer, writing recipes for food blogs. The irregular hours are due to client deadlines." Michael watched, barely breathing, as the detectives searched the apartment. Emma maintained an impressive calm, answering each question with studied ease. When their eyes briefly passed by the closet, she skillfully redirected their attention to the kitchen, offering to show them her recipe notes. After what seemed like an eternity, the detectives finally left. Emma waited 10 long minutes before opening the closet. Michael emerged, shaking not just from the physical discomfort, but from the realization of the real danger they were facing. "They weren't real police," Emma whispered, her hands trembling as she poured 2 cups of tea. "Real police would have shown a warrant, asked more specific questions. They were looking for something, or someone." Michael gripped his cup tightly, trying to steady the tremor in his hands. "James must have figured something out. I've been trying to keep everything normal, but..." "He's smarter than we thought," Emma finished, her face pale in the soft glow of the lamp. "And now we know he's not alone in this." The silence that followed was thick with fear and determination. Michael watched Emma, noticing how she seemed simultaneously vulnerable and strong. This woman had lost everything once because of this fight, and here she was, risking it all again. "We need to change our strategy," he said finally. "I can't let you go through all that again." Emma met his gaze, a fierce determination in her green eyes. "It's not just about me anymore, Michael. It's about doing what's right, about all the people who've been hurt by this scheme. We can't back down." In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just the shared danger or the weight of their secret. It was a deeper understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits united by something greater than themselves. Katherine used to say that a person's true character is revealed not when everything is fine, but when we face our greatest storms, Michael said softly, surprised by the spontaneous mention of his late wife. Emma smiled sadly. "Your wife sounds like a very wise woman." She paused, considering something. "Michael, if something happens to me?" "No," he interrupted firmly, moving to take her hands in his. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. We're in this together now." The touch of their hands sent an electric shock through both of them, a moment of connection that went beyond their circumstances. For an instant, they weren't a guilt-ridden CEO and a lawyer seeking justice. They were simply two people finding comfort in each other amidst the storm. The distant sound of sirens brought them back to reality. Emma quickly stood, heading to the window to check the street. "You need to go. It's not safe to stay here for long." Michael reluctantly agreed, but before leaving he turned to her. "Emma, thank you for showing me that there's still hope for redemption." She smiled, a smile that lit up her tired eyes. "Redemption is in the choices we make every day, Michael. And you're making the right choices now." As he drove back to his empty home, Michael realized that something fundamental had changed within him. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by something stronger. A determination born not just from the desire to do what's right, but also to protect someone who had unexpectedly become important in his life. The night embraced the city with its dark cloak, hiding the secrets of two hearts that, amidst the danger and uncertainty, had found a connection that transcended their circumstances. The storm that was coming would be fierce, but now they had something more precious than any material wealth. They had each other. Morning arrived with a gentle rain washing the city streets, as if trying to cleanse the secrets of the night before. Michael watched the drops trickling down his office window, his mind constantly returning to Emma and the events of the previous night. The fear still pulsed in his veins, but there was something else, a growing certainty that his life would never be the same. The intercom buzzed, bringing his secretary's voice. "Mr. Bennett, Mr. Morton is here for the 9 o'clock meeting." Michael took a deep breath, adjusting his tie in an automatic gesture. "You can send him in, Susan." James Morton entered the room with his usual confidence, his perfectly rehearsed professional smile in place. But there was something different in his eyes, an underlying tension that Michael had never noticed before, or perhaps never wanted to notice. "Michael, we need to discuss the new contracts for the South project," James began, spreading folders across the table. "The numbers are excellent, but..." As his CFO spoke, Michael studied him with new eyes. How had he not seen the signs before? The whispered phone calls, the late-night meetings, the insistence on keeping certain information simplified? Emma's voice echoed in his mind. "Sometimes, we don't see what's right in front of us because we choose not to." "Michael? Are you listening?" James's voice pulled him back to the present. "Sorry, James. I haven't been sleeping well lately." Michael forced a smile. "Katherine always used to say I worked too much." The mention of Katherine caused something to shift on James's face. A flicker of guilt, perhaps? "Your wife was a wise woman," he said softly. "I'm sorry she's no longer with us." It was at that moment that Michael realized something that hit him like a bolt of lightning. James had been one of the biggest advocates for the company's aggressive expansion right after Katherine's death, exploiting his moment of greatest vulnerability. "You know, James," Michael said, keeping his voice casual while his heart pounded in his chest, "I've been thinking a lot about Katherine lately. About how she always insisted we build something we could be proud to leave behind as a legacy." A heavy silence fell over the room. James watched him with an unnerving intensity, as if trying to read more than his words. "The legacy is here, Michael," he said, his voice low. "The Bennett Construction Company has never been more prosperous. But at what cost?" The words escaped before he could stop them. James' smile faltered for a moment. "Costs are part of the business. You've always understood that." The tension in the air was palpable. For a moment, the masks fell and the two men locked eyes, the weight of years of lies between them. The rest of the day passed in a blur. After James left, Michael sent an encoded message to Emma through the system they had developed, arranging a meeting for that night at their usual spot. When he arrived at the small cafe, he found Emma already sitting at her usual table, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. There was something different about her, a fragility he had never seen before. "Something happened," she said as soon as he sat down, not a question but a statement. Michael told her about his interaction with James, about the revelations he had. Emma listened intently, her green eyes never leaving his face. "Michael," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I discovered today." She opened her worn purse and took out a yellowed envelope. "This arrived today at my old law office. A former colleague who still works there contacted me, said he had been holding on to this for years, waiting for the right moment." With trembling hands, she pulled out a set of documents from the envelope. Their emails, between James Morton and the doctor who treated Katherine. The world seemed to stop. Michael felt as though all the air had been sucked out of the room. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. "The experimental treatment she received, it wasn't approved. James knew the risks, knew it was dangerous, but pushed for it to be used anyway. The emails show that he had financial interests in the pharmaceutical company." The ground seemed to be crumbling beneath Michael's feet. Memories flooded his mind. Katherine insisting that something was wrong with the treatment, him assuring her that the doctors knew what they were doing, blindly trusting James' recommendations. "She tried to warn me," he whispered, tears beginning to streak down his face. "And I didn't listen." Emma quickly moved to his side, gripping his hands tightly. "You didn't know, Michael. You couldn't have known. But I should have known." His voice cracked. "She was my wife, my partner, and I..." The words were lost in a choked sob. Emma embraced him, ignoring the curious stares of the other cafe patrons. For long minutes they stayed like that, sharing a pain that words could not express. When they finally pulled away, something had changed between them. It wasn't just the physical closeness, but a deeper connection, forged in shared pain and mutual understanding. "What do we do now?" Emma asked softly. Michael wiped his tears, a new determination rising in his eyes. "Now we seek justice. Not just for the fraudulent contracts but for Katherine. For all the lives they've destroyed with their greed." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of compassion and determination. "Together?" "Together," he confirmed, holding her hand firmly. The rain continued outside, stronger now, as if the sky itself was crying with them. But inside that small cafe, two wounded souls found strength in each other, preparing to face the storm that was to come. The truth about Katherine had changed everything. What had begun as a quest for redemption was now transforming into something deeper. A mission for justice, a chance to honor a memory and perhaps to heal wounds they both thought would never scar over. The revelation about Katherine had left a deep mark on Michael, turning his quest for redemption into something much more personal. Emma's apartment had become a refuge where the masks could fall, where the truth, no matter how painful, was allowed to exist. On a particularly difficult night, as they organized the evidence they had gathered, Michael found an old photograph among the documents. In it, Katherine smiled brightly in front of the first social housing project by Bennett Construction. A project she had insisted they pursue. "She had the gentlest eyes I've ever seen," Emma commented softly, noticing how Michael held the photo with such care. "You can see it in the photos from the company's charity events?" Michael smiled sadly. Katherine believed that wealth without purpose was a golden prison. She used to say that every brick we laid should build not just walls, but hope. Emma moved closer, sitting beside him on the small couch. "Is that why you started going to church after she passed?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Looking for answers, trying to understand why I lost the only person who kept me true to myself." The silence that followed was filled with a mutual understanding that words could not express. Emma gently covered Michael's hand with hers, a simple gesture that carried the weight of all the comfort he needed at that moment. "I think I found something," she said softly after a few minutes, reluctant to break the moment but aware of the importance of her discovery. "In the records from Andrews and Partners?" Before she could continue, there were loud knocks at the door that interrupted her words. These weren't the authoritative knocks of fake policemen. It was something more urgent, more desperate. Emma cautiously stood up, signaling for Michael to hide again. Through the peephole, her expression shifted from apprehension to shock. "My God," she whispered, quickly opening the door. On the doorstep stood a young woman, trembling and visibly frightened. "Miss Crawford? My name is Lisa Morton. I was Robert Morton's secretary." The surname made Michael step out of his hiding place, ignoring Emma's warning glance. Lisa entered quickly, her wide eyes recognizing him. "Mr. Bennett? I didn't know you'd be here, but maybe it's better this way." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I have something you need to see." "Something about Katherine Bennett?" The air in the small apartment became thick with tension. Emma guided Lisa to the couch, while Michael stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. "How did you find us?" Emma asked gently, handing the young woman a glass of water. "I've been following you for a few weeks," Lisa admitted, her hands gripping the strap of her purse. "After I found out, after I saw the documents, I knew I had to do something, but I was so scared." She opened her purse with trembling fingers, pulling out a USB drive. "Here's everything: emails, transactions, recorded conversations. Robert? He didn't know I had access to his personal computer. He trusted me because..." Her voice faltered. "Because we were having an affair." Michael and Emma exchanged tense looks as Lisa continued. "At first, I thought it was just normal business, but then I found the messages about Katherine. About how they deliberately..." Tears began to streak down her face. "How did they deliberately what?" Michael asked, his voice barely recognizable. "How they manipulated her test results. The experimental treatment? It wasn't just risky, it was lethal. They knew. James and Robert knew. It was part of a bigger plan, to weaken you emotionally so you wouldn't question the company's decisions." Katherine was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about certain transactions. The sound that escaped Michael's throat was somewhere between a sob and a contained scream. Emma was immediately at his side, holding him as his legs gave way. "Why are you telling us this now?" Emma asked, keeping her arm tightly around Michael. Lisa wiped away her tears. "Because last night I heard Robert on the phone. They found out about you. They're planning." James said accidents happen every day. When I heard that, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't carry this guilt any longer. The apartment fell into absolute silence for several long moments, the distant sound of traffic outside a reminder that the world was still turning. "We need to act now," Emma finally said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Lisa, would you be willing to testify?" The young woman nodded slowly. "Yes. I lost my soul keeping these secrets. Maybe helping you is how I can start to forgive myself." Michael finally stood up, his eyes red but determined. "Katherine always said the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how long it takes." He looked at Emma, then at Lisa. "I won't let her sacrifice be in vain." Emma gently squeezed his hand. "It won't be. But we need to be more careful than ever now." As the night wore on, the three of them remained in the small apartment, planning their next steps. Lisa's presence had changed everything. Not just because of the information she had brought, but as a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, human conscience could still find its light. Michael watched Emma as she organized the documents, her silent strength more evident than ever. Amid the devastating pain of the truth about Katherine, he found a new kind of hope in the unexpected connection he had formed with this extraordinary woman. A connection forged not only in the pursuit of justice but in something deeper. A mutual understanding between two souls who had known loss and yet chose to fight for the truth. Dawn was approaching, and Emma made coffee for the three of them, a simple gesture of normalcy amid the chaos their lives had become. The familiar aroma filled the small apartment, offering a moment of comfort amidst the storm of emotions. Katherine loved coffee, Michael commented softly, holding his cup with both hands as if seeking warmth. She used to say that every cup was a new opportunity to stop and really see the people around us. Lisa, who had remained silent for some time, looked up. She used to do that at the company too. She always made time to talk to everyone from the executives to the cleaning staff. That's how she started noticing the irregularities. She really listened to people. Emma watched how Michael absorbed each new piece of information about his wife, as if every small detail was a precious gem to be kept. There was a quiet intimacy in the moment, three people bound by painful secrets and the search for truth. "We need a plan," Emma finally said, her voice soft but determined. "Something that will allow us to expose everything without putting any of us in unnecessary danger." Michael nodded, sitting up straighter in his chair. The pain was still there in his eyes, but now there was something more, a purpose, a determination born not just from the pursuit of justice, but from a deep desire to honor Katherine's memory. "Lisa," he turned to the young secretary, "you said you have recordings. Could you tell us exactly what they contain?" As Lisa detailed the contents of the evidence, Emma watched Michael's subtle transformation. Each new revelation seemed to simultaneously wound and fortify him, as if the truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to his true healing. The night wore on, and with it grew the certainty that they were about to embark on the most dangerous part of their journey. But they were no longer alone. Amidst the pain and secrets, they had found something precious, a true connection, an improvised family united by the search for truth and the desire to do what was right. Dawn brought not just the promise of a new day, but the certainty that some stories need to be told, some truths need to come to light no matter the cost. And perhaps, just perhaps, in the process of exposing the shadows of the past, they would find not only justice but a new beginning, one Katherine would have been proud to see. The day dawned with a clarity that seemed almost ironic, considering the shadows Michael, Emma, and Lisa had faced throughout the night. The small apartment, which had borne witness to so many painful revelations in the past hours, now served as headquarters for their final plan. Michael adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror, his fingers trembling slightly. It was strange how the familiar gesture now seemed so different. No longer an armor of corporate success, but a necessary disguise for his most important mission. "Are you ready?" Emma asked softly, appearing in the reflection behind him. Her green eyes, though tired from the sleepless night, conveyed a strength he had learned to rely on. "No," he admitted with a small, sad smile. "But Katherine always said that being ready is less important than being willing." Emma gently adjusted her tie, an intimate gesture that made Michael's heart race. "She's still guiding us even now." Lisa emerged from the small room, gripping her bag tightly. "The flash drive is secure. I've made 3 copies just as we agreed. One will go with each of us." The plan was simple in theory but dangerously complex in execution. Michael would return to the company as if it were any normal day, keeping James distracted with an important board meeting. Emma would use her old contacts to ensure the evidence reached the proper authorities. Lisa would return to Robert's office, keeping her eyes and ears open for any suspicious movement. "Remember," Emma stressed, "we need all the documents to be exposed simultaneously. If one of them notices before—" "They won't notice," Michael interrupted gently, taking her hands in his. "You brought us this far, Emma. I trust you." The moment between them was interrupted by Lisa's phone vibrating. Her face paled as she read the message. "Robert's asking where I am. He says there's an urgent meeting with James this morning." "It's starting," Emma murmured. "We need to go now." The 3 of them prepared to leave, each taking a different route to avoid suspicion. Before departing, Michael grasped Emma's arm. "If something happens," he began. "No," she interrupted firmly. "We're not saying goodbye. This isn't the end, Michael. It's a beginning." He nodded, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms. Instead, he gently touched her face, a gesture that spoke all the unsaid words between them. The Bennett construction office was buzzing with its usual morning activity when Michael arrived. Susan, his secretary, greeted him with her usual professional smile. "Mr. Bennett, Mr. Morton is already in the boardroom with the directors." Michael felt his heart race. There hadn't been any board meeting scheduled for that morning. All the directors? "Yes, sir." Mr. Morton insisted it was urgent. As he walked toward the boardroom, Michael could feel the weight of the flash drive in the inner pocket of his suit jacket. Each step echoed with the revelations of the previous night, the truth about Katherine, the love he had found amidst the pain. James was standing when he entered, his usual smile replaced by a grave expression. "Michael, glad you could make it. We have serious matters to discuss." The room was crowded, every director present, some faces he hadn't seen in months. At the far end of the table, Robert Morton was seated, his cold eyes fixed on Michael. "Before we begin," James continued, "there's something I need to share with everyone." He gestured, and one of the security guards closed the door. "Recently, I became aware of certain irregularities occurring within our company." Michael felt the blood freeze in his veins. How had they discovered it? "In fact," James went on, his voice taking on an almost paternal tone that Michael now recognized as purely manipulative, "these irregularities point to an elaborate scheme of embezzlement and bid rigging." A murmur ran through the room. Michael kept his expression neutral, though his heart was thundering in his chest. "The most shocking part," James continued, "is that this scheme seems to have been orchestrated by our very own CO." All heads turned toward Michael. That was when he noticed something, a small smile on Robert's lips, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. "James," Michael began, his voice surprisingly steady, "you've always been brilliant at manipulating narratives. That's how you convinced Katherine to accept that experimental treatment, isn't it?" James's smile faltered for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you?" Michael pulled the flash drive from his pocket, placing it on the table. "Maybe the emails between you and her doctor will jog your memory. Or the recorded conversations about how you deliberately falsified the test results." The door to the room suddenly opened. Emma entered, accompanied by two men in dark suits who were definitely not company security. "Gentlemen," one of them announced, showing a badge, "I'm Agent Parker with the Federal Police. We have a search and seizure warrant for this company." Chaos erupted in the room. Robert tried to reach for his phone, but one of the agents stopped him. James, for the first time since Michael had known him, looked genuinely frightened. "How?" James stammered, glancing between Michael and Emma. "You're not the only one who knows how to play chess, James," Michael replied calmly. "Katherine taught me that sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to protect what really matters." Emma stepped forward, standing beside Michael. "The documents are already with the authorities. All of them. Including Katherine's medical records and the transactions from Andrews and Partners." "You don't understand," James pleaded, his face pale. "Everything we did was for the good of the company. Katherine was asking too many questions, threatening to expose." "Shut up," Michael exploded, stepping toward James. Emma grabbed his arm, her touch pulling him back to reality. "It's not worth it," she whispered. "He'll pay for his crimes the right way." The next few hours were a whirlwind of statements, seizures, and revelations. Lisa appeared later, bringing even more documents that proved the extent of the corruption. The press began to gather outside the building, drawn by the unusual movement of police vehicles. By the end of the day, Michael stood by the window of his office, watching as James and Robert were escorted out of the building. Emma was by his side, her presence a pillar of strength and comfort. "Katherine would be proud," she said softly. Michael turned to her, seeing not only the strong woman who had helped him expose the truth, but also someone who had, in an inexplicable way, become incredibly precious to him. "You know what's strange?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think she guided us here. Do you?" Emma smiled, tears glistening in her green eyes. "Maybe she knew we needed each other to find our redemption." Michael gently wiped away a tear that had fallen down Emma's face. "It's not just redemption I found, Emma." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Amid the shadows that were finally fading away, two souls that had met at the most unlikely moment discovered that sometimes, you have to go through the darkness to find the brightest light of all. The love born from understanding, courage, and shared truth. A year had passed since that pivotal day at Bennett Construction. The small chapel was bathed in the soft light of the evening sun, filtering through the stained glass windows, creating a mosaic of colors that danced over the few people present. Michael stood before the altar, where years before he had said goodbye to Katherine. But today was different. Today was a day of new beginnings. Emma walked toward him, not in an elaborate wedding dress, but in a simple, elegant ensemble that perfectly reflected who she was. Her green eyes shimmered with a mix of love and gratitude, while Lisa, now her closest friend, stood by her side as maid of honor. The ceremony was intimate, exactly as they had planned. Only those who truly mattered were present, those who had shared their journey of pain and redemption. "I never imagined I'd be here again," Michael whispered when Emma reached the altar. "Let alone find love amidst all this chaos." Emma smiled, the same smile that had become his beacon through the darkest nights. "Sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely to find our true path." The last year had been one of profound transformation. After James and Robert's arrest, the truth about the corruption scheme and Katherine's death came to light. The legal process had been long and painful, but it brought a form of closure Michael hadn't known he needed. Bennett Construction underwent a complete restructuring. With Emma's full support, Michael transformed the company into a model of transparency and corporate social responsibility. The first project under the new direction was an affordable housing complex, a quiet tribute to Katherine and her dreams of making a difference in people's lives. Lisa found her own form of redemption, taking on a crucial role in the company's compliance department. Her experience with Robert and her courage in exposing the truth made her an unwavering advocate for business ethics. "Michael Bennett," the pastor began, his gentle voice echoing through the chapel, "you have found something rare and precious, a second chance at love. A chance to honor the past while embracing the future." Michael gently squeezed Emma's hands, remembering the first time he saw her, huddled at the entrance to his building. How could he have known that encounter would change his life so profoundly? "Emma Crawford," the pastor continued, "you remind us that true strength is not in never falling, but in how many times we rise and help others rise." As they exchanged vows, the memories of the past months rushed through their minds. The nights of planning in the small apartment, the moments of fear and uncertainty, the small victories that brought them closer and closer. Each challenge had strengthened not only their love but also their understanding of what truly mattered in life. "Katherine taught me about integrity," Michael said in his vows, his voice choked with emotion. "You, Emma, taught me about courage. About how true love is not just about feelings but about choices. The choices we make every day to be better, to make a difference in each other's lives." Emma wiped away a tear before starting her own vows. "When I lost everything, I thought I was alone in the fight for truth. You showed me that it's never too late to start over, that sometimes we have to go through the darkness to appreciate the light. This is not just our marriage, it's a celebration of hope, of redemption, of love that is born in the most unlikely places." Lisa, watching her friends, could not hold back her own tears. She had witnessed every step of this extraordinary journey, from fear and guilt to this moment of pure joy. After the ceremony, as the few guests gathered for an intimate celebration, Michael and Emma found a moment of quiet in the chapel garden. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors they had seen on the day of their first meeting. "You know what I miss most about her?" Michael said softly, looking at the sky. "Katherine always used to say that life has a funny way of giving us exactly what we need, even when we think we're lost." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. She was right. "Look at us, a CEO tormented by guilt and a homeless lawyer. Who would have thought we'd find not just justice but love? And purpose," Michael added. "The Katherine Bennett Foundation is already making a difference. Helping people who lost everything find a new beginning just like you helped me." The foundation had been Emma's idea, a way to turn the pain of the past into hope for the future. Using part of the resources recovered from the corruption scheme, they created a legal and social support program for people who, like Emma, had lost everything fighting for the truth. Lisa approached them in the garden. "The guests are asking for the newlyweds, but I thought you'd like to know. I just received the news that our first scholarship recipient from the foundation passed the bar exam." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "See? The cycle continues. Every life we touch is a new chance to make a difference." Michael hugged his now wife, feeling a peace he never thought he'd find again. The past would always be there, the memories of Katherine, the scars from the battles they fought, but now those memories no longer trapped him. Instead, they served as a foundation for something new and precious. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked softly. Emma smiled, the same smile that had become her light in the darkness. "With you? Always." As they walked back to the celebration, Michael thought about how life has mysterious ways of healing our deepest wounds. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find something even more precious. Sometimes it's in the darkest shadows that we find our brightest light. And sometimes when you least expect it, love finds you exactly where you are, turning our scars into testaments of hope, our pain into purpose, our past into a springboard for a brighter future. Dear friends of life stories, Michael and Emma's journey reminds us that even on the darkest nights, there is a light of hope waiting to be discovered. Their stories of loss, redemption, and unexpected love touch the deepest parts of our souls because they reflect universal truths about the human condition. Our ability to rise from the ashes, to find love when we least expect it, and to turn pain into purpose. If this story touched your heart, if you saw yourself reflected in Michael's search for redemption or in Emma's unwavering courage, share with us in the comments the moment that resonated most with your own journey. What did this story awaken in you? What memories or hopes did it bring to the surface? Join our community of storytellers and listeners, a space where every narrative is a bridge between hearts, where every story shared is a reminder that we are never truly alone in our struggles and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next stories of love, courage, and transformation. Your like is more than just a click. It's a virtual hug for everyone like Michael and Emma, who are discovering that it's never too late for a fresh start. See you in the next story, where once again we'll dive together into the depths of the human heart. With love. The Life Stories Team *.